Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Carla Carter. I'm from the National Celiac Association. I'm the Director of Education and Programs, and this is our Parent Roundtable meeting. And we are just still letting a couple people in. Stacy is my co-host tonight. She's our Program Support Manager. And of course, our guest speakers tonight. Whoops. Back up a little bit. Dina Abbey, PhD clinical and school psychologist, and she's also an NCA executive board member. And Grace Shirley, she is an NCA teen advisory committee member, and we're so thankful that they can both join us tonight. Just a bit about the National Celiac Association. We are a nonprofit organization. We are dedicated to literally helping everyone with celiac disease and gluten-related conditions to thrive every day. And that includes their family members and the communities throughout the nation. We have lots of programs on our website, nationalceliac.org.
So, hi everybody, my name is Dr. Dina Abbey. I have a degree in clinical and school psychology. And I lost my screen. Hold on one second. I have a degree in clinical and school psychology, and I work with children who, among other things, have eating and feeding disorders. Many of the children that I work with also have metabolic disorders. And I, as Carla mentioned, am a board member of the National Celiac Association. So feel free to ask any questions. You can throw them down in the chat, and hopefully I'll be able to answer anything that comes my way. So how can we help our kids navigate the gluten-free world with confidence? It's important that we recognize where our role as parents start and end and what our job is as parents. So when we talk about the living gluten-free within a world that is not always gluten-free, that can be gluten-free, it's important that we're aware of our thoughts, that we acknowledge our emotions, understand why all these matter and how they impact our kids. And then once we're calm, we'll be able to utilize strategies to help our children live confidently in the world. So why do we have anxiety about celiac disease? And this isn't an all-inclusive list. It's just a few main points, right? Anxiety isn't bad per se. Anxiety is just a data point. It's just information. It lets us know whether or not something is safe. We might have really mixed feelings about celiac. We may have guilt that, oh, this is what I gave my child. There may be some stress. What are they going to eat? Are they going to get sick? I'm afraid if I let them out, they're going to make a poor decision. These are all information. They're not bad. And when they become all encompassing, it becomes a problem. So we have to rethink our relationship with anxiety. We're worried that our kids will get sick if they eat gluten. Sometimes they feel it and then they're in the bathroom or they're really uncomfortable. Sometimes they don't feel it, and that often makes us even more nervous because they're not going to know that they're having any damage to their systems. And they're just going to keep eating it, and we're concerned. Food is also ubiquitous. Kids can't escape food. It plays an outsized part in our social lives. And it's all over. It's our fears about food are wide ranging. So it makes sense that we're going to be concerned about our kids and celiac because the only way we have to treat it is with food. So we need to be able to prepare and to make a plan. And we know that control decreases anxiety. But when we try and control too much or control things that are not within our control, that anxiety springs right back up again because we're butting up against an immovable object, something we can't control. Knowing that, it's important that we recognize the role our thoughts play in anxiety and our feelings about anxiety, especially here vis-a-vis celiac. So we all have thoughts. We think all the time, but it's important to remember that we aren't our thoughts. They are separate from who we are. Sometimes we can get caught up in our thoughts and the stories that we tell ourselves, and it's hard really to separate ourselves from our thoughts. But we're not our thoughts. And just because we have a thought doesn't mean it's true. If I say that the sky is purple, it doesn't mean the sky is purple. I can yell it, I can scream it, I can be adamant about it, and the sky is still not purple. It's just a thought. So when we're able to take a step back away from our thoughts and stop um, recognizing or personalizing them and believing that I identify with my thoughts, this is who I am, and they are the truth, we're able to put some space in there. And remember, it's just a thought. It doesn't have to be true, and I don't have to talk to it or own it. That pause gives us the ability to respond to situations instead of have a quick automatic reaction. And a response involves thought. And that pause gives us that space to bring our sympathetic nervous system down, to pause, right, and to think, and then have a response instead of having a quick reaction. Our kids watch everything that we do. So our thoughts have an impact on us and in turn have an impact on our children, right? So practice makes perfect, right? When we overthink and we talk back to our thoughts, the thoughts spiral and we spiral. We're reinforcing that neural pathway. I tell parents it's kind of like riding a bicycle in mud. When you ride a bicycle in mud, you really dig deep and you create that groove. So when it dries, that track is already there. It's really hard to veer from it. The same thing is true with neural pathways when it comes to our thoughts. We are, when we kind of spiral and we have these thoughts and we then talk back to our thoughts and converse with our thoughts, we're reinforcing that neural pathway, and it becomes much harder then to veer off of it and to ignore them, or at least acknowledge them. That's the next one. Just say hi, then get punched. We can acknowledge our thoughts, we can label them as thoughts, but we don't have to engage with them. So I tell kids that when they have a big thought that comes into their head, we can say, hi, welcome to the party, to my thought party. I'm glad you're here. I can't talk to you right now. I'm going to go get some punch, have fun and mingle. And then you've acknowledged the thought, you've said hi to it, you've labeled it by name. I see you, jealousy, or I see you, thought, and then walk away from it. We don't have to discuss everything with our kids. And even when we don't, and I have lots of parents who say to me, no, 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 I never talk to them about it. Or I never say this in front of them. Our kids are really good and in tuned at picking up our thoughts and feelings. So we don't think we're saying anything and we don't think we're purposely sharing with them, but they're picking up on it. And so it's important to remember how powerful that is and we are in the lives of our children. When we are calmer, our kids are calmer. That doesn't mean that they're not going to have big reactions. That just means that it's like fighting with like a half blown up balloon, right? It's not fun. It doesn't respond the way we expect. So we walk away and we engage in something else. The same is true. When we're calm, our kids are going to calm down much quicker. And so they pass it on and they learn also to build in a pause and have a response instead of a quick kind of snap reaction to their big feelings. So, how do we acknowledge our emotions? Just like our thoughts, our emotions can feel big and loud. They can kind of take over everything. But again, they're kind of like jeans. We can put them on, we can take them off. They aren't who we are, they're just emotions. And how we handle our emotions shows our children how to handle their emotions, right? So the first thing we have to do is when you have an emotion, we got to notice it, and we got to acknowledge it. And then we do a technique that we pull from mindfulness and we note it, right? We label the emotion as a feeling or even as the emotion, like, oh, that's scared, or oh, that's jealous, or oh, that's nervous. It's important also to remember our feelings aren't good or bad, they just are. It's kind of like green. Green isn't good or bad unless we're talking about meat. Green just is. We determine, we put on that label of good or bad. We weight it, but it's not, it just is. Feelings are data points. They just are. If we find that we're caught up in talking to our thought or a story or a fantasy or judging ourselves or someone else, note that too. Oh, I'm doing it again. I'm caught up in a story. And then we take a deep breath. We find our anchor, right? Think about your senses and we get back to calm so that we can build in that pause. Oh, I don't know why. Sorry, give me 1 second. I don't know why it's not going. There we go. Oops, let me go back. Okay, so once you're calm, now what do you do? So it's important to remember that not every child is the same as every other child. And your child, if you're honest and you know your kid, you got to look at how your kid's going to respond. Not every kid has the same needs, and we shouldn't treat every kid as though they're the same. Knowing your child and remaining calm is going to help you communicate to them about their needs and to trust them to stay safe, because that's our job. Our role as parents is not to have happy children. Our role as parents is to put forth children, humans, 18-year-olds, who can function in the world. But that starts when they're younger, like 3. So we have to give them knowledge, right? We have to give them the skills to ask, hey, can I have this? Or to read labels. And in that way, and leading up to that, we have to also give them the vocabulary to talk to others about their needs. I expect some children to be really embarrassed because this is yet another thing that might set them apart. I had a son, I still have a son, who when he was younger, he could not write. He still cannot. He's got something called dysgraphia. All of my kids have it actually. And it's neurological. They cannot form letters appropriately. But my eldest had such a hard time with it that not only could other people, including teachers, not read his writing, but he couldn't read his writing. So he had to use, a Chromebook when no one else had it. He never wanted to, and he kept failing the tests because he didn't want to look different than everybody else. No one else had a Chromebook. Why should he? Celiac is yet another thing where the kid's going to stand out, right? I can't eat the pizza that everyone else is, or I can't eat the cupcakes that everybody else is having. My mom has to bring food to birthday parties. The calmer we are and the more like, hey, I hear you and I totally understand it. But everybody's got something. You just may not know what other people have. Giving them those explanations, giving them the vocabulary to say, hey, listen, we're going to go up to the mom and we're going to say, I have celiac, I'm gluten free. What can I eat? Those skills are empowering to our children and they help them recognize that they're not alone and there's nothing that's weird or off putting to other people, especially about them standing up for themselves. So it's important to give our children the confidence and the vocabulary, as well as the opportunity to speak with other parents, their friends, at restaurants, giving them the words and tools to be able to ask for either a gluten-free menu or asking what I can have, not for you to speak for them, but for them to have the practice to speak up for themselves. The more they practice, by the way, speaking up for themselves, the less scary it is because it's not novel anymore. And they get more information about, oh, it's not a big deal. Nobody had a big reaction. I'm able to do this. And they become more confident and are more likely to do it in the future. So, fear and vigilance. It's important to recognize when we are spiraling out of control and to do something, right? This goes back to how do we calm down? How do we learn to respond and build in that pause instead of react? So, this will give us an appropriate plan for our child when they're in a situation that's uncomfortable. We also have this idea of a certainty trap, right? I have to make sure that everything around the child is safe. I have to make sure that I only have a totally 100% gluten-free household, and the classroom is, if there's any food in the classroom, it's only gluten-free, and they can't eat at the in the cafeteria. They have to eat at the nurse's office away from everyone. And that certainty trap truly is a trap. We will create more problems, not only for ourselves, but for our child, because you will never have 100% certainty. So it's important to learn how to have, how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and where that line and boundary is. So again, with the certainty trap, right? That's not a realistic goal. We can't control everyone. We can't control everything. I had we all know parents who can go overboard with research. And there's new research all the time, and it depends on who you listen to and the information you get. And what then information are we giving to our child about we're not sure, so we're not safe. They're not sure, so they're not safe. You can't believe anybody. So we have to take a step back, right? We have to know who we trust. We have to understand where our information comes from. And we have to be okay with not everything being 100% and being in control of things all the time. So, in that way, we need to define our goal and then align our behavior with the goal. If our goal is to keep our kids safe all the time, 100% of the time, well, we can't accomplish that. That's not a goal that's in our control. But if our goal is to help our children build healthy, independent life and safety skills, that we can do. And is our current behavior bringing us closer to our goal? So that goes back to balancing fear with vigilance. Sometimes our actions can lead to greater food anxiety and in extreme examples, eating and feeding disorders. So that over avoidance trap, being overly careful about the food our children encounter, it's a form of over control that might temporarily create calm in the very, very short term, but that we lose that very quickly. And it makes the children's world much, much smaller and, in fact, significantly less safe. So we need to teach our children how to step outside of their comfort zone and our comfort zone. We need to know that controlling everything is not sustainable. If we tried, we could create developmentally inappropriate issues for our child. We can create inappropriate issues for their relationship and our relationship with them. We could also create eating disorders. I worked with a 9-year-old who had anorexia and orthorexia, and she was checking every single label of every food. She was so thin that she didn't have energy to go up the stairs. We don't want to do that. Avoidance. So avoiding gluten-free foods might allow us to control potential threats, but it stops us from going to other activities, from hanging out with friends, from making relationships with people. It creates distance and animosity and resentment between us and people around us, our siblings, the kids' siblings, our other children, potential friends and neighbors. It's important to teach our children where that line is. And you can be around a piece of bread, just don't eat it. Don't lick the countertop. You know how to keep yourself safe. And it's not by totally never ever being near gluten food or making sure that other people around you never have gluten food, which comes down to what's safe enough. There is a cost benefit analysis here, and we have to look at our risk tolerance. And that's going to be based on our knowledge and then our doctor's information. Nothing is 100% certain. We have to be good enough, especially about exposing our children, not orally, not eating it, but in their life to people and food that has gluten in it. So here are some strategies, some like hardcore strategies for parents. What are our values, right? The safety and health of our children is very important, utmost. The socialization and connection with other people for our kids, that's also really important, that they can live and function and have fun in the real world, have people to turn to, have friends, have a social circle, that they're independent and they're able to live their life fully out in the real world by themselves so that they could have their own life and their own family. And that our children can be comfortable with appropriate adventure and fun, that they're not so nervous that they're afraid to leave our side or our house or their very small confines. It's important to know and to teach our kids that it's okay to be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable isn't necessarily bad, it's a data point. So we validate uncomfortable feelings and we practice skills to make novel situations less scary and easier to manage. That means we have to put ourselves and our kids in these novel and uncomfortable situations. And we say, I know, you're uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable, but we know what to do. Let's go do it. We have to change that what if thinking to if then. So, what if thinking is future focused anxiety, right? Oh my God, what if this happens? And what if this happens? And what if this happens? There's never an answer to that. And that just puts us back in that loop of anxiety. But there is a if then change that we can make. If this happens, then what? So that allows us to plan should something occur. Um, we now have an idea, we have confidence in our internal capacity and thereby teaching our kids their internal capacity to handle whatever situation occurs without them being hyper vigilant about something. They're not worried about a future threat because if a future threat comes, then this will occur. This is what I'll do. Which goes back to that Goldilocks principle, right? That just right for emotional tolerance. We're not talking about what's just right or safe enough regarding gluten ingestion. We're talking about what's just right for the amount of anxiety that we could manage and live with to still allow our child to have a fulfilled life. There's got to be that level of, okay, I can live in the world with gluten. I don't have to go to a dedicated restaurant. I can go to places that I know are safe. And that's that Goldilocks principle, that just right. So here are some strategies also for different ages with kids. It's important to remember that what we're going to introduce at different stages and the independence we're going to give kids at different stages is different depending on the age and stage of the child. And you have to know your own kid. Our goal, again, is to put forth 18-year-olds who can learn to function in the world, not who are so nervous that they can't eat. So we have to give our children knowledge of their disease. We need to talk about it. We need to be matter of fact and not kind of fear mongering. And we need to use developmentally appropriate language. I'm not going to tell a child in specific detail, a 3-year-old, all the crazy things that could happen. First of all, they're not going to understand. And if they do even understand, we're going to terrify them. Developmentally appropriate vocabulary. What we're doing is teaching our kids not to be scared, just to be aware. When we're calm and confident, we give our children that calm and that confidence, and we empower them then to live in the real world because we're giving them real world practical tactical skills. So when we're talking with like very, very young kids, put stickers on foods that they can eat. That doesn't mean that there's only gluten-free food in the house, but it means that every piece of, every pretzel that's in the house that has the bright green sticker that says gluten-free or GF, you can eat. Also, teach them to ask, is this gluten-free? Not can I eat this? Because a well-meaning, a well-intentioned babysitter or other parent or some ever is going to say, yeah, you could eat it, it's fine. And in fact, they can't. So it's important to give them, again, that vocabulary. Is this gluten-free? Who's a trusted adult? Who can I ask? Not just someone who's taller than me, right? When we get to preschool and early elementary school, it's important to teach them basically how to read gluten-free and where to look for it. They might not be able to read the words, but they can tell the shape of that. And if I see something that has that same shape, I know it's safe. And if I advocate for my friend with my friends and my teachers, I can ask them too, right? Giving them an opportunity to advocate is super important. When they get older, we're talking about elementary school and those higher age years. It's important then to teach them how to read labels, what to look for on read labels, on the food labels. Again, how do they advocate in the lunchroom? I was very lucky. My school had gluten-free hot lunches, but my kids had to ask for it. So that's one of the things that I taught them. How to advocate if they have classroom parties or snacks. What about outside at other parties or at friends' houses? And also how to prepare and take safe snacks and foods. I went to a party this weekend. There were 60 people at the party, 30 of them were kids. And somebody said, oh, I have one child coming that's gluten-free. I made 48 cupcakes, eyeball cupcakes, so that everybody could have cupcakes, and this child didn't feel like they were different. Oftentimes, I called up when they were serving food at birthday parties in school because my kids are a little bit older. I would ask the parents, hey, if you're making a vanilla cupcake and it's going to have chocolate frosting, just tell me and I'll make sure my son has a vanilla cupcake with chocolate frosting so that what they had looked like everybody else's. But my mom and I, it's not a big deal. Whenever we go to parties, we have our own little bags and we bring food that we could eat. And so it didn't matter, whatever. We're very chill about it. We have all these yummy foods that we know are safe for us and we bring it everywhere. We don't care, which then shows children and our children, it doesn't matter if you bring your own food. It's not rude. No one cares. It's just a thing and it's safe. And you don't have to be embarrassed. In middle school, now we kind of cut the cord a little bit. Let's give cues rather than directors. You want to have a snack? Like bring something just in case? And if they don't, there's going to be a natural consequence. They're going to be hungry and they're going to want to bring a snack next time. Or they're going to get sick. The minute we say you should bring a snack, they're going to say, absolutely not, I'm not going to, right? Or now we're making them more reliant on us because if we don't say something, they're not going to do it and they expect us to. And let's give them a cue. Let's put the onus on them. That in vivo, real world experience is the best teacher. It's also important to teach them to use apps, right? Many of them have smartphones now. So let's use it safely to speak to friends, right? You're going to go to your friend's house. Don't forget to ask. To speak to restaurants because they're going to start going places without you. And we can start to introduce them to more sophisticated cooking and baking techniques so that they could make their own and they feel empowered regarding the food. In high school, again, and this is true in general of teenagers, the calmer we are, the less reactive for less time our teenagers would be. And that is so hard. And I know that. But the calmer we are, ultimately, the calmer they will be. So here it's important to teach our kids what to look for in different settings, how to find a maitre d' at a bigger party, how to ask, hey, what can I eat? To be okay with asking for gluten-free menus in restaurants, or hey, is it already labeled on here? It's important to teach them how to be flexible and how to shift perspective regarding their safety and needs so that they're not so rigid in their thinking and, oh, I definitely can't go there. I can't eat anything. Okay, so if you go and everyone's going to Applebee's and you can't eat anything, you sit and you have fun. It's cool. Don't worry about it. Right? It's more in this case about enjoying your friends than it is about engaging in food. Another time you'll go somewhere else. That flexibility is one of the most difficult things to teach, but if you can model it and teach it for your children, you are giving them a tool that they will use in multiple settings. They can generalize throughout their life, and that's huge. So I can take any questions anyone has. Thank you so much for listening.
All right. Now I'm going to stop recording after you address this one. There was, I think, a discussion in the chat, as well as a question ahead of time about ARFID. Can you just, and I also know Grace wanted to pop on and give some of her 2 cents. So if you could just address ARFID real quick, related to celiac disease, and then I'll stop recording and we can get into some more questions.
Sure.
And Grace.
There is a higher incidence of ARFID in the population that has celiac disease. So it's not uncommon. ARFID is absolutely treatable, though. And this does go back to, there are people, I am someone who does, but there are lots of people who specialize in working with kids who have ARFID. It's really about teaching them how to tolerate discomfort, how to tolerate what they can and cannot eat, empowering them and practicing it over and over and over. And you can't over practice this.
And just for people who don't know what ARFID is.
Oh, it's avoidant food restrictive intake disorder. So I had a child who only ate yellow food. Kids who will only eat crunchy things. That's a sensory thing. There isn't a medical reason behind it. Like, it's not because they can't swallow it. So, or that sort of, like, they're not eating peanuts because they have a nut allergy. That's not ARFID. And then I mentioned orthorexia earlier. Those are people who only eat very specific, super, super healthy foods. And that becomes unbelievably restrictive as well. So there is that line, again, for ARFID and for orthorexia, which, like, when is it too much? And when it's life interfering, and you'll see it life interfering, that's when we get it treated. You're going to see ARFID in a much younger population than you would with orthorexia.
Thank you so much for that, Dina, and for your amazing presentation just now. You covered so many really important topics. Grace, did you want to touch on anything? I'm going to stop recording.